Go.
Okay, welcome everyone. My name's Jay Arena, and welcome to this Movement for Socialism sponsored forum entitled How Do We Defeat Trump? It's a movement discussion. And I think part of the answer to that crucial question has been provided in the streets with the disruptive power that has been unleashed in the wake of Trump's election, and in particular since his inauguration. We had the mass protest January 20th, inauguration day, including right here in Newark, New Jersey. MFS mounted a protest in Independence Park. We had the Women's Day marches the following day across the country. 10,000 people marched in my former city of New Orleans, the largest march since 1963. We had the emergency airport actions around the country in response to Trump's ban on immigration from Muslim countries, and we've had various student walkouts against the imposition, confirmation of Betty DeVos as the Secretary of Education. But as important as these actions have been, they are not sufficient in order to defeat Trump. And that's kind of the central argument of the movement for socialism. If we are going to be effective in defeating Trump and kind of Trump light in the agenda of the Democratic Party, we're going to have to fight not simply against the outrages that Trump is unleashing, but what we are for, right? And not simply what we're for with respect to like some single issue around education or immigration, but what we are for, what alternative program are we going to present? What alternative world do we want, right? A kind of an updated version of Bread, Land, and Peace that inspired the Russian Revolution some 100 years ago, which we are commemorating this year. Now, to underscore this point of the need for presenting an alternative program, an alternative world, I want to go back a few years to 2008. It's almost a decade now since the financial implosion, the greatest economic crisis since the 1930s. As we remember, the housing bubble, which had kind of inflated artificially the economy, burst. It brought down the whole financial system. Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, IAG, and the whole financial system. General Motors went bankrupt. Led to unemployment, official unemployment, even under the conservative measures of 10%, massive unemployment, housing foreclosures. And not only this came in the wake of just a few years before Hurricane Katrina, which among other things underscored, unmasked the deep decay in our infrastructure in this country. And this was followed up with a so-called recovery plan that was really about mass privatization of the remaining public services in that city, which has been modeled. They've taken that around the country. We also had, of course, the debacle in Iraq, their imperialist operation, and then the continuing ecological crisis. And yet, in spite of all that, they came out with their program, their solution, the ruling class solution, right? Massive bailout of the financial system, of General Motors, funneling literally trillions of dollars through quantitative easing and other measures into the coffers of the banks and corporations, and they've done wonderfully, right? The stock market has basically tripled. It was around 7,000 in the wake of the crash. The recovery, overwhelmingly, the bulk of the wealth and income increases have gone to the top 1%, 1/10 of 1%, 1/100 of 1%. The recovery, the stimulus package that Obama did present was basically used to deepen the attacks, like around education and the race to the top. And the jobs that have been created have been mostly low-wage and temporary Uber type jobs. So why wasn't there alternative? Why couldn't we have said, why wasn't it offered that we just take over the financial system, right? The state take over. It was bankrupt, and these financial corporations, as I would have shown in a graph, but our technology isn't working here right now, but most of those financial institutions control most of the major corporations, and they were insolvent. So the state could have just taken them over, democratized them, carry out a mass public works program and public jobs program, democratically organized. But that wasn't right. It was there is no alternative but their alternative. Why is that? Why couldn't we have had another? Well, part of that is what Marx said, right? The dominant ideas of any era are those of the ruling class, and that was clearly shown in how that crisis was solved under their terms, right? It also shows how deep those ideas are within even the left, right? In New Orleans, for example, after Katrina, the ruling class privatizes everything, and we even had some groups on the left, no, we don't want to have the government run this, we don't want to defend this, we're going to get our groovy little private clinic, we're going to set up our free school. That government failure ideology of the ruling class is deep within the left. And it's also represented in how we organize. What passes for the left is basically a variety of single issue, non-governmental NGOs, non-profits funded by the foundations, who narrowly raise demands that are permissible within the Democratic Party. They keep them within what we'll call our silos, right? We have all these little movements, these different issues, different oppressed groups, but they keep it in a very narrow approach. And it's all within what the Democratic Party thinks it's permissible, right? And the unions, the union hacks basically operate within that same framework, right? So what we are saying, if we're going to defeat Trump, if we're going to defeat, again, Trump light in the Democratic Party, we're going to have to fight for what we are for, right? Not simply just what we're against, but what we're for, right? And again, not around in a single issue, but in a comprehensive, coherent program, an alternative world, right? And that's going to be crucial if we are going to have any kind of power that's going to instill any fear in the ruling class, which they don't have in our movements for the most part, right? The only way that we can instill fear in them is if we have a mass movement that's uniting a comprehensive program. Then we can start getting concessions. At this point, all we are is negotiating the terms of defeat. We're negotiating the cuts. But we can build a united front, right, with a common program. Then we can start getting concessions in the short term, and in the mid-range, get what we want, right? And so what do we want, right? What is our program, which we did march under on January 20th here in New York, Newark, excuse me. We're in the shadow of New York, but we're Newark, in New Jersey. Small action, but I think qualitatively it was an advance over the other actions in that we were fighting for what we want for a comprehensive program. One is, the top of the agenda is free public services, jobs for all, right? A mass public works program, democratically organized, right? And that could reach all these different silos that we are in. Mass transit, education, free higher education, right? We need a massive expansion of our K through 12 schools. We need a massive housing program, right? We need the environment, right? We're fighting against these pipelines. We don't need pipelines. We need clean alternative energy. We need a mass program to develop clean alternative energies, which a public works, public services program, and a whole host of criminal justice, the reform movement as well, a whole host. All these movements, right, could be addressed with this program, and we would have to, right, make the rich pay, right? This is what we want. We want to tax the wealth and income of the rich, and we have to end the war machine, dismantle the U.S. war machine to fund this, right? The second demand, equal rights and citizenship for all, right? If we are going to win this program, right, we have to be united, right? We can't have 12 million people, right, undocumented, and their families who are excluded, or even more, those that are formerly incarcerated, carry a felony conviction, and are basically excluded from what little public services we have today. So to win that, we have to fight for citizenship for all. And conversely, For the undocumented, the only way they can get citizenship for all is if they are fighting for jobs for all, right? Because we can't win citizenship for all if we're all going to be fighting over a limited pie, right? A limited number of jobs, a limited number of public services. We both have to fight together to win what we need. The only way that we can make any advances. And crucially, all of these kind of hang together is we need what we call public banks for all, the democratization, the nationalization for finance. This is crucial on a number of levels. One is, if we're going to have mass public services, right, if we're going to have a good mass transit system, we're going to have to wipe out the debts that, that municipalities, states, different public authorities now are weighed down under, right? And they're phony debts, right? These banks were bailed out by the state, and then we have to go and turn to these banks to borrow the money back and then pay them back. That charade has to end. That's crucial for winning the public works. Also, around citizenship rights for all, we argue for equal rights for all, citizenship for rights for all, free movement for all, right? But conversely, we also are for the right to stay put. Be it here in Newark, where the Democratic Party and Ras Baraka and his buddies in Trenton and in Washington are carrying out a massive gentrification drive, driving working class people out, right? We also have in Mexico, throughout Latin America, throughout Asia and Africa, and in Europe, right? These austerity drives by the banks, by the IMF, by the World Bank, imposing these austerity agendas, super exploitation that are forcing people to emigrate, right? At the threat of death, as we've seen the Mediterranean turned into a sea of death, as well as the Caribbean, right? And this underscores too that there is plenty of work to be done, right? There is lots of work to be done. If we have a public works program, there's going to be plenty of jobs. We're not going to be fighting over trying to build walls. There's plenty of work to be done, and also including reducing the hours of those that are working. Another one of the graphs I would have had, we'll do this in another presentation, is that the number of hours that the average worker in the U.S. is laboring at, right, if they do have a job, has been continually increasing since 1980, since the beginning of the end of the long post-World War II boom. Those hours have been increasing for the average worker. And this is, on top of that, right, more women have increasingly come into the workforce, right? So, and that's created crises at the home and personal relationships. And so with this kind of program, we're going to expand jobs and we're going to be able to reduce the amount of hours, raise the demand for 30, 40, right? 40 hours pay for 30 hours a week. So I'm gonna wrap it up right there. But that is our response to how we are going to build an effective movement against Trump and Trump light in the form of the Democratic Party. So we have a discussion here, and then we're going to follow up on kind of the historical basis of this type of movement.